Welcome back, Defenders. To start today's video, we first have to clear up some misinformation. After my previous video, lots of people left me comments saying, "Jake, you're wrong about Trump. He just cut off all military aid to Ukraine." This is the headline. Rubio halts most foreign aid, including Ukraine assistance, according to Politico. There's a difference between foreign aid and military aid. And U.S. military aid to Ukraine continues despite Trump's 90-day foreign assistance freeze. If you don't believe me, believe President Zelensky. Weapons keep flowing to Ukraine, thank God. Zelensky says after U.S. reportedly halts civilian aid. And this is open source intelligence. Anyone in the world can track these cargo planes. And the U.S. air bridge supporting Ukraine continued this weekend, with 3 fully loaded 747s departing the United States and arriving at the Polish border. We're almost a week into Trump's presidency, and the Russians desperately wanted two things. They wanted all sanctions on Russia lifted immediately, and they wanted all military aid to Ukraine to cease immediately. And neither of these things have happened. Donald Trump has this power to do both of those things for Russia, and he's choosing not to. So if you want the specifics, what did Marco Rubio freeze under the State Department? And this is the Foreign Military Financing Program, but there's barely any money left in this program, so freezing it for 90 days doesn't really matter. Where these weapons are coming from, this is the PDA, the President's Drawdown Authority, and the USAI program under the Department of Defense. The Department of State under Rubio is a different pool of money than the Department of Defense. Pete Hegseth is now in charge of the Department of Defense. He was confirmed yesterday in a 50-50 vote, with J.D. Vance casting the tie-breaking vote. I'm basically neutral on this guy. He's an idiot, he's in over his head, and Trump picked him because he likes him and he looks good on TV, but as long as he stays out of the way, it shouldn't be a problem, and I don't think he's going to freeze military aid to Ukraine unless Trump tells him to. So let's now go back to that interview that Putin gave 2 days ago. Putin flatters Trump, says Ukraine war wouldn't have happened if his victory wasn't stolen from him by the Democrats in 2020. If you didn't see this interview, I'll link it again down below. Putin is speaking to this Russian reporter, and I'll just give you the summary. This is Putin kissing Trump's ass, flattering him as much as possible. There's no way that Putin could have debased himself more, been more of a beta male to Trump in this video. This was astonishing to watch. And Putin is looking for a meeting. We really should meet, Putin says as Trump threatens new sanctions on Russia over Ukraine. Now we know what Putin is trying to do. Zelensky is trying to get invited to these US-Russia talks. I think they're going to happen in the next couple weeks. But this isn't going to happen. Trump wants to meet with the Russians. He wants to meet with Putin one-on-one because it's an opportunity to have the world's attention. And he doesn't want the Europeans or Zelensky there to steal his thunder. Now, if Trump wanted to betray the Europeans and betray Ukraine, he would have done it by now. We're a week into his presidency. So this summit between Trump and Putin is going to happen in the next couple weeks. And Zelensky is not going to be invited. But it's not a big deal. We all know what Putin is trying to do. Zelensky warns Putin wants to manipulate Trump on the topic of Ukraine. So is the interpreter going to be an attractive woman? Is Putin going to try and get Trump alone one-on-one again? This happened during Trump's first presidency. And that just isn't going to happen based on the national security team that Trump has picked. We like Marco Rubio, we like Mike Waltz, and then there's this guy who's in charge of the entire show. Incoming Trump peace envoy suggests oil crackdown to push Russia to negotiate. This is retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, and he knows the Russians. He understands the Russians, and he's the one who's going to be advising Trump every step of the process. So Keith Kellogg made another appearance on Fox News, and the angle that Trump wants to take at the moment is applying pressure on Russia through oil prices. This is something that Keith Kellogg agrees with, and he's going to explain this in this Fox News clip.
Last September, when they were at Trump Tower with Zelensky, he said it's time, and it is time to end it. And I think he can do it when he gets the dialogue going. And I think but the most important thing I think everybody needs to understand, Dana, it's not going to end kinetically. What I mean by that, it's not going to end by killing each other. This is going to end, and he said this yesterday when he was at Davos, when he made the comment to the people there, that the key role of not only diplomacy, but economics as well. Let me just use one example, oil. You know, the price of oil right now is probably, when you look at Brent or WTI, the baseline pricing, it's about $78 a barrel. So Russia's getting billions of dollars of money from oil sales. What if you drop that to $45 a barrel, which is basically the baseline break-even point? That's what he made the comment yesterday
So this is Keith Kellogg saying this war is not going to end kinetically. We can't just give Ukraine more weapons and expect for them to overpower the Russians. We need an economic collapse of Russia, or the threat of an economic collapse, to make the Russians stop this war. And Trump really likes this idea of lowering oil prices because that would make him more popular here at home in the United States. And once again, Trump is repeating this message every single day.
Stop it. Now, one way to stop it quickly is for OPEC to stop making so much money and to drop the price of oil, because they have it nice and high. And if you have it high, that war's not going to end so easily. So OPEC ought to get on the ball, and they ought to drop the price of oil, and that war will stop right away.
Now, I understand the price of oil and its fluctuations. I think the average American doesn't. This is the price of ICE Brent crude. It's currently at $78 a barrel. And $78 a barrel is not that high. If we go back to the summer of 2022, it was 120. 110 is high. You could even argue 100 is high, but 78 is actually pretty decent. And Trump saying that we need to get this back down to 45. That's where the price was almost 5 years ago. And I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the price of oil is going to come down globally to $45 a barrel. But it could come down to 60. 60 could be possible if OPEC decides to pump more. Now, I don't understand why would OPEC do that. The purpose of OPEC is to make as much money as possible. But if Donald Trump has good relations with the Saudis, if there's something the Saudis want, some kind of security guarantee against Iran or weapon sales or something, I don't know, then yes, Saudi Arabia could increase production temporarily, lower the price of oil, where Russia can no longer pump at a profit. The Ural's price of oil is cheaper than the global price. It has to be sold at a discount because it's a lower quality grade. But yeah, I mean, this is a plan, and I'd love to see Trump pursue this over the next couple months. This is a good thing. So what are the Russians saying now that Trump is threatening to go after their oil revenue, which is important to fund the war? And here is the Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, being asked if this is important to Russia. And he replies, no, this conflict does not depend on oil prices. This conflict is happening because of a danger to Russia's state security, of a danger to Russians who live on the known territories, and due to a complete refusal of Americans and Europeans to hear Russian security concerns. So this is Russia's story, and they're sticking to it, that the cause of this war is Russia's security concerns. Security concerns from who? The NATO alliance? Who is the largest and most powerful military in the NATO alliance? And it's America. Is Russia today willing to admit that America is now their security risk? America is threatening Russia because Donald Trump is now president. Is Russia saying that Donald Trump is a threat to Russia's security, and that's why they need to continue this war in Ukraine? Who else could possibly be a threat to Russia? Is Finland going to invade Russia? Is Estonia going to invade Russia? Like, you have to logically think through this sometimes, and if Peskov wants to maintain that the war has to continue because NATO is a threat to Russia, then they're saying Donald Trump, leader of the United States military, which is the leader of the NATO alliance, is a threat to the Russians. It's absurd. That's not the cause of this war. But here's the bottom line, and I think Trump's going to eventually realize this. We didn't ask Stalin's permission to create NATO when the NATO alliance was created. We didn't ask Khrushchev's permission to bring West Germany into the NATO alliance. We didn't ask China and North Korea for permission to forge alliances with Japan and South Korea. Therefore, today, Russia has no standing, no right to deny the sovereignty of Ukraine. If the NATO alliance wants to enter into a military agreement with Ukraine, whether it's bilateral security guarantees or full NATO membership, Russia doesn't get a vote. Russia has no say. The Russians just have to deal with it. But we know that that's what this war is not really about. It's about control, it's about resources, it's about empire. And if Putin succeeds in Ukraine, these wars are not done. Also, from this Fox News interview, the United States is now seriously considering buying weapons for Ukraine using frozen Russian assets. Let me play for you this part of the clip.
And they have a piece today that says America must continue to arm Ukraine without U.S. taxpayer dollars. One of the suggestions would be to let Ukraine use frozen Russian assets to buy U.S. weapons. Is that on the table?
Well, that's a discussion piece. That's always part of it because you have all these options and you want to present the President of the United States with multitudes of options so he can pick which one he wants to go with. But I think we've always talked about it. We've talked about this repeatedly of using Russian frozen assets to do that, to buy U.S. arms. I mean, that is one piece of the puzzle that needs to be discussed and it's going to be on the table with the President to talk about.
It's on the table. For 3 years under Joe Biden was never willing to publicly say this. Why don't we just take Russia's frozen money in Western banks and then use that to fight the war? Europe might still not want to do this, but I don't think Trump cares. Anything that's frozen in G7 banks, use it to buy American weapons and then send those weapons to Ukraine to fight the Russians. Trump is also okay with Lend-Lease style programs where Ukraine can have a line of credits and buy whatever they want from U.S. inventories. Then when the war is over, they have to give it back or pay it back, and they can do so with signing agreements with Western or American companies to get oil, gas, and natural resources out of the ground. We can be creative here. We can all admit that for 3 years, Joe Biden and the Democrats lacked some creativity to come up with other solutions to support Ukraine. Now, concerning Donald Trump's rhetoric, he's going to say and do things we like, but he's also going to say and do things we don't like. And in that interview 2 days ago, he said, Zelensky is no angel and shouldn't have allowed the war to happen. What could Zelensky have possibly have done to have prevented the war that Putin was always going to launch since 2014? Putin was always going to do this. There's nothing Zelensky could have said or done aside from capitulating to the Russians and surrendering his country. This invasion was always going to happen. Also, the United States suspended immigration programs for migrants, including Ukrainians. Almost 200,000 Ukrainians have resettled in the United States, and their status potentially is at risk. I, however, think this is going to be reviewed. Rubio with the State Department will reverse this. I don't think any Ukrainian refugees that have resettled in the United States will be deported or anything like that. But it is a scary headline for people living with uncertainty. Trump is also serious about annexing Greenland. I don't really want to talk about this as an American, but if you're one of my European viewers, I, of course, oppose this. This is reckless and dangerous language from Donald Trump to be talking about seizing Canada, Greenland, and Panama with military force. But I just don't think this is going to happen. Like, without Congress voting for it, it's not legal or lawful for any military member to take action against our military allies. So this could end up going nowhere, but I think Donald Trump likes the attention, and talking about annexing Canada, I think he just finds it fun. To my Canadian viewers, I know this is not fun, but he might lose interest and then start talking about other things like in a month or two. Wait him out. Seoul suspects North Korea plans to send more troops to Russia and Ukraine. So now Donald Trump is saying he's going to reach out to Kim Jongun. I don't understand the friendship and relationship that these two men have, but I don't need to. If Donald Trump can meet with or talk to Kim Jong-un, and then North Korea decides to stop sending troops and military aid to Russia, this is good for Ukraine. I'm going to let this happen. I'm going to encourage this. It's weird, but I'm going to encourage it. Thank you, President Trump, for reaching out to the North Koreans. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Putin tells Russians to expect a long war. Behind closed doors, to his own people, this is what Putin is telling him. He's not looking to negotiate. He's not looking for peace talks. He's not looking to end these wars. He's looking to outlast the Western coalition. And he's hoping our will collapse before the Russian people collapse. But they got problems. This is Russia's central bank interest rate, currently holding at 21%. And there's something very bizarre happening concerning Russia's central bank chief. Russian state media is attacking her. This is a woman, I forget her name, Nabiullina. This is a woman who didn't even want the job. When Putin invaded Ukraine, she tried to quit and resign, and Putin forced her to stay in the job. And now, people like Soloviev are attacking her on TV every day because Russians are so upset about inflation and central interest bank rates being so high. So Soloviev on Kremlin State TV is now attacking her, calling her the mega regulator. Let me read for you what Soloviev is saying about his own central bank chief. Our economy is not where the president of the Russian Federation, who answers to the people, Putin, set the goal for it to be. I spoke about this topic separately yesterday. The mega regulator is not keeping the inflation under control. The mega regulator does not understand what needs to be done to control it. It's already obvious. All these companies, all these meetings among themselves, all this talk to Soloviev so that he shuts up, all of this won't work. The mega regulator cannot manage the set task. This is obvious from what Putin says when he is forced to state that inflation does not correspond with the forecasts. At the same time, the task is not to kill the economy and to cool it, but to fulfill the set tasks for the national projects by 2030. For this purpose, it is necessary to understand that inflation must be controlled, but entrepreneurial activity must still exist. The economy should be developing. The West gives us two criteria: crazy tax, the crazy refinancing rates, which is a personal project of the mega regulator, and the second one is inflation. The reason why inflation is so out of control in Russia is because of defense spending on this war, and the fact that the Kremlin is forcing private Russian banks to give unsecured loans to defense contractors so they can keep producing. That is why the central bank in Russia has to keep raising rates. It's a house of cards, guys. It's going to collapse at some point this year. So let's get to the bad news for Russia. Russia's Ryazan oil depot on fire for the second time in a couple days. This appears to be a new tactic from Ukraine where they hit an oil refinery, it explodes and catches on fire. They wait for the Russians to put out the fire, and then they strike that oil refinery again. So this is where the Ryazan oil refinery is located, kind of southeast of Moscow. And I don't know if the first fire was still going, but Ukraine struck it again. Major Russian microchip factory halts production after Ukrainian drone strikes. This is a microchip factory that was targeted 2 or 3 days ago, and it was a victory. Ukraine struck it, and now Russia has to stop their assembly line process. Ukraine destroys undetectable Russian radar system in Zaporizhia. Anytime you get an air defense or a radar system, that's a huge win. If you want to see the video of it going boom, I'll link it down below. 2 planes in the last 24 hours had trouble in Russia. An A-24 rolled off the landing strip and crashed into the bushes. Thankfully, no casualties. I don't want to see any Russian civilians killed in a plane crash, but you've got a death wish if you're getting on a plane flying over Russia. There was also a Boeing 737 that had to divert. It was flying from Moscow to Istanbul, and it experienced technical issues. There's another Shadow Fleet tanker that had an engine failure. It's currently floating off the coast of France. And yeah, it's another ecological bomb as the Russians continue sailing these Shadow Fleet tankers that are not being properly serviced or maintained. Russian coal miners face bankruptcy. I didn't even know about this. Russia's coal industry is in crisis as mines face bankruptcy against the backdrop of low world prices, it has been reported. Because the central bank's rates are so high, in order to borrow money to keep your business going, you can't operate at a profit anymore. Every industry in Russia is being saddled with unrealistic debt, and none of them are going to survive if Putin continues this war. Let's now go around the world. Belarus election offers Lukashenko versus no one else. So Lukashenko decided to re-elect himself, and what's his secret to success? And all of his main opponents are either in prison or exiled, and nobody in Belarus is allowed to criticize Lukashenko in any way. Also, the internet's out. Lukashenko shut off the internet in Belarus for 3 days to stop people from rioting and protesting during his re-election. So shocker, Lukashenko won the election with 87% of the vote. And when I saw the 87 number, I had to laugh. Like, it's so obvious and stupid. But when Putin had his rigged election in March of this year, Putin gave himself 88%. So Lukashenko, in his own rigged election, was not allowed to look better than Putin. So Putin gave himself 88%. Lukashenko gave himself 87. It's so dumb, guys. It's just so dumb. But the people are rising up against these idiots. Mass protests sweep Slovakia as Prime Minister Fico warns of a Maidan scenario. Massive protests are currently happening in Slovakia in response to their corrupt Prime Minister doing the Russians' bidding. Slovakia is a member of the EU and NATO, and Fico only seems concerned with how Russia is doing. So there are videos, I'll link them down below. These are massive protests. I hope that we can get some kind of critical event and potentially Slovakia can get rid of their corrupt prime minister. And this is early reporting, but there might be 4 members of Slovakia's parliament willing to break away from the governing coalition. I guess there's 150 seats in their parliament, and you need 76 for a majority. If these 4 defect, Fico's government will fall, and they'll have to have new elections. I also want to mention the protests happening in Serbia. This is Belgrade. Serbia, for centuries, has been an ally of the Russians, but Russia can't really help them anymore. I also want to mention there's still protesting happening every day in Georgia against their corrupt pro-Russian governments. So these are the people. These are the people living in Russia-friendly countries that want real democracy, they want a reduction in corruption, and they want real prosperity. This is the map. Russia is under pressure in Moldova. They're allies in Transnistria. They're under pressure in Slovakia, Serbia, and Georgia. If Ukraine can succeed, all of the pro-Russian governments will collapse, and then these people can have real democracy and real prosperity. Final clip I want to play for you guys is a Georgian protester. She's a university student, and I'm going to try and play it. YouTube is very aggressive with blocking music content, so if there's no audio, you know why. But I'll link the video down below either way if you want to hear this Georgian student singing.
Je vais te parler d'un temps que les mois de 20 ans ne peuvent pas connaître. Mon matron, cet homme-là, a créchi celui-là jusque sous nos fenêtres. Si l'âme les garanit, qui ne servent de nid, ne payait pas de mine. C'est là qu'on s'est connu, moi qui crie famine et toi qui poses un nœud. La bohème, la bohème, ça voulait dire en terreur. La bohème, la bohème, nous ne mangions qu'à jour sur deux.
Russia will be defeated. Keep up the pressure. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.